Buddy Reagan's association with the Madison Church of Christ television outreach began in 1958. While working in secular television in Nashville, God began using Buddy's talents to help the Madison Church with its TV ministry. Buddy directed a Bible-based quiz show called Know Your Bible. This new relationship would last for several decades.
Okay, Noel, you know how the game works? Thousands of quotations in the Bible. If you can come up with the very one she sends in, why, fine, you've won the game. If not, we've stumped the panel. You may ask questions till you have 10 no's. 3 minutes. Start with you, Noel Meredith.
The decade of the 70s began with an opportunity to have the world's largest TV Bible class. The Amazing Grace Bible class went on the air on June 20, 1971.
I can't tell all of you how thrilled we are to have you at the Amazing Grace Bible class. This is our premier telecast.
Also in the early 70s, Buddy directed a 5-minute sermonette called 5 Golden Minutes, delivered by Ira North, which aired at Sign On and Sign Off on a Nashville TV station. During the decade of the 90s, Steve Flatt assumed the role of teacher of the class, and the Amazing Grace Bible class and Christian Productions began traveling to remote locations.
We seek God, but I want to see if you have enough faith to fall forward and see if I'll catch you. All right. I hope our cameras are able, while we're here, to take a panorama view of the wonderful scenery that exists here. It's magnificent. Paul and Silas are in prison, and there's an earthquake in the middle of the night, and the chains fall off of them. I'm standing on the banks of one of the most historic sites in all the world. This is the Jordan River. It flows from the Sea of Galilee all the way down to the Dead Sea. Right now we're passing out Bibles in the street in Bucharest. Virtually all of them have never owned a copy.
Other television and Christian video outreaches that Buddy oversaw included
Nosotros, pero hay un testimonio más todavía. Nosotros y
El Espíritu Santo.
el Espíritu Santo.
Wait a minute, Happy. Wait a minute. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't say bicycling. I said recycling.
A trip was also made to St. Petersburg, Russia, to film Sacred Treasures, Sacred Roots. This video and television program demonstrated the strong connection between the Bible and religious art in Russia.
It's tragic that we have not been able to use this mass media to make people aware and interested in the greatest cause on earth.
You're calling me Buddy. That's not my name. My real name on the birth certificate is Jesse Roger Ragan Jr. Nobody knows Jesse Roger Ragan except Mary Varello. She calls me Jesse Rogers all the time. But everybody else, if they are looking for me, they're looking for Buddy. And why is that? Because when I was born, my daddy, I was born over on Murphy Road in a house, and my daddy had been married before and had lost a son of 18 months old. So when I was born, my aunt was telling me this, that they handed me to him, and with me being in his hands, she said that tears were rolling down his eyes, and he was saying, "My little Buddy, my little Buddy." And she said I was called Buddy from that point on. And I just thought that people would like to know that there is another side of Buddy Reagan. We moved to Madison when I was 5 years old. Actually, I went to church in that rock chapel for many years. And as we were here, even to the point that my daddy helped build that basement. We lived in Madison for many years, and I grew up here. My daddy died when I was 12 years old, and at 13, I was baptized at Madison by C.J. Gardner. I went to school at J. Taylor Stratton. And then, when I got ready to go to high school, I couldn't afford it, but my aunt paid my tuition to go to Lipscomb. When I was in Stratton School, there was a program, the park program called Pee Wee Football, that I played football with the Madison Rams. I loved playing football. It was great. But when I went to Lipscomb, they didn't have a football team. And all those people I graduated with from Stratton were going to Lytton, East, Goodlettsville, and they were all playing football. All of my Pee Wee buddies were playing football. So as time went along in my sophomore year, I was really disappointed in the fact that I couldn't play football. I had a niece going to Bellevue at that time, and she said, hey, why don't you just come to Bellevue? You can play football down there. So I considered that, and I thought, I think I will. So we moved to West Nashville, and I did go to Bellevue. But prior to going to Bellevue, when I was at Lipscomb, there was an incident. My niece going to Bellevue, and I was at Lipscomb. She called one day when she said, hey, Bellevue's playing Lipscomb out there in baseball. She said, I want to come out and watch the game, but I don't know where the field is. Could you meet us at on the corner of Granny White and Woodmont Boulevard and show us the way? And I said, sure. So I did. I got in the car when they got there and directed them where to go. And there were these girls in that car. One of them was a very attractive young lady that caught my eye, and I was introduced to her. And so we went on to the ball field and watched the ball, and then they left. So that was that little incident. So when I got to Bellevue, when I reported to Bellevue, I saw that girl. And she was in the junior class. That was good too. But she was dating someone else. But I said, that's a good-looking woman. Anyway, time went along, and latter part of the junior year, I did make the team, by the way. And by that part of, and I was in Hog's Heaven by being able to play football. Latter part of the year, this girl that I was talking about, her name happened to be Norma Lindsley. And she was a cheerleader. And she came up to me and she said, the cheerleaders are having a wiener roast. Would you care to go with me? I said, what about Jimmy? Oh, we broke up. We're not going together. Wow. we went on that. She asked me for the first date. And that was the entrance to our 65 plus years together. The blessing of my life, no doubt about that. Anyway, that was that incident. And then we graduated from Bellevue, and I received a scholarship to Southeastern School of Radio and Television Broadcasting, which was only a one-year school. It was a brand new school, and it was something that I had been nominated for and received because I couldn't go to college. I couldn't afford it. My mom couldn't afford it. I just couldn't. So this was a good opportunity, God-driven, because it was from a lady that was at church. She knew of our situation, and God directed her to put me in nomination. I just have no idea that, at that particular time, but looking back on it, I see where God directed that as part of my life. And that's what started me on my career. I went to that school after I received my certificate. I applied to the 2 stations that were on the air and the third one that was coming on the air. At that time, it was Channel 4, Channel 8, and Channel 5 was coming on the air. But Channel 8, Channel 4 were on the air at that time. And I applied to both of them. Wouldn't have me. Even with that school, that didn't mean anything because I was draft eligible. And they said, you're a prime, because that was during the Korean War. So I said, well, I got to work, So I got a job at Tennessee Glass Company as an apprentice glazer, and got married. We married in February the 23rd, 1956, and I was working at Tennessee Glass. One day I got a call from a fellow that I had gone to the school with at Southeastern School of Radio and Television Broadcasting. His name was Bill Hentz. And he called me, and he was working at Channel 8. I thought that was interesting. He said, we have an opening, and would you be interested? I said, well, sure. I said, but I've applied before, and they wouldn't take me because I'm draft eligible. However, I have joined the Army Reserve, so I'm at least situated in Nashville. And he said, that's good because that'll work. I said, all right. So he set me up for an interview with the operations manager, which was named Jim Lina. And Jim was also an on-air person, but he was operations manager. So I interviewed with him, and he, at that time, said, after we had chatted for about an hour, he said, can you start soon? And I said, well, I guess I could, 2 weeks notice, He said, well, I can pay you X amount, and you can start in 2 weeks. I said, is that all? I said, I'm making more than that now. And I said, I just got married. We're starting a home. Hey, I can't take a cut in pay. And he said, well, that's all I can do. Boy, my opportunity of a lifetime, right? I just couldn't do it. So I told him no. Went on back to work. A couple of weeks later, I get a call It's from Lina. He says, I think I've worked something out. I'd like to talk to you again. So I went to see him. He said, I can beat that, what you're making right now, by guaranteeing you 48 hours a week, 8 hours of overtime every week. And that was a good increase in what he had offered before. I said, you got it. And that's when I started working at WSIX TV, Channel 8. I forgot to mention something earlier. When I first started with Channel 8 originally, there was a program already on the air that I was a cameraman for. And it was Know Your Bible with Ira North, and as the host, of course. That's when I first really got to know Ira. My first day on the job. You know, this is a glamour business, this television is. And I'd just come from church because I had to report on a Sunday. And I had my suit on. Hey, it's a glamour business. I go in with my suit on, right? Al Rust was the floor manager at that particular time. He was in charge that Sunday. I reported to him. He looked me up and down. He said, that won't work, suit. He said, in the future, you got to come dressed to work. But today, you're like you are, this is it. He said, your first job is to paint those flats over there. And, you know, they were grayscale back then because it was still black and white. And I had to paint those flats. So off comes the tie, the coat, what have you. But I still splattered my pants with paint. Ruined the only suit that I owned. But I learned it's not a glamour business. So anyway, that was my start with WSIX. Jim Lina was a mentor for me. I worked everything that you can except as an engineer. I was in audio, I was on air, I directed, I ran camera, lighting, set building, film, shot film, whatever. I did everything. That was back when you could. That was before unions and where you were pigeonholed into a specific position. Hey, you could do anything if you wanted to try. And I did. And I would stay after hours sometimes to learn directing. I would sit by Jim and watch him direct. And I was picking up every pointer I could from him. And I would watch the audio men. I would pick up everything I could from them. And I just worked everything there was to learn. And as I was doing that, Jim was teaching me and mentoring me all the way through. It was the greatest God-given event was to be able, that he would place me in position for Jim to mentor me. And I am certain that he appointed that. I will say that one of the highlights was working with Hudley Crockett. A lot of people of the older generation would remember Hudley. He and I are still friends even today. But we had a great time in the relationship. There are a lot of stories I could tell about. When I was directing, I directed all of his newscasts because he was a news anchor. I never had a script. Everything was by sign language. I knew when to go to film, I knew when to go to slide, and I knew when to go to commercial by his sign language. Those were different days than today. And as time went along, Lina left. He got a job at KTAL in Shreveport as operations manager. And when he left, I was able to step in his shoes from a standpoint of directing and doing all of the things that he had been doing. And that was a step up. And that was, again, a blessing that I was able to do that. Years went along. I got this call from Jim Lina from Shreveport. He said, I'm going to be leaving Shreveport. And he said, since I'm leaving, would you be interested in coming down here and replacing me? I said, are you kidding? What? And he said, yeah, I've talked to Jim Dugan, the general manager, and I've recommended you. I flew down, had an interview with Jim, came back, and about a week later, he called me and said, you've got the job. So we moved to Shreveport. God opened that door, had me step in it, and he had already established all of those people working in those jobs were good. They knew what they were doing. All I had to do was just let them do their job, even though I didn't know what they were doing, but I learned. During that time, Jim Dugan thought I was doing a good enough job that after I was there a year, he promoted me to program director, which increased my oversight of things that I had never experienced before. So, like in contact with the NBC affiliate, I'd never talked to the NBC network people or any network people. I was the negotiator for the station. I'd never done that before. But God took care of me. He helped me get through that and learn. And I did it. Jim Dugan didn't ever know the difference. But anyway, I thought that was another God-led incident in my life. From there, there's a new UHF station going on in Dallas, Texas. Major station, major market. Wow. And I am contacted, would you be interested in putting a station on the air in Dallas, Texas? Are you kidding? So I do. I go to KMEC, Channel 33 in Dallas, Texas. God leading me through it with a inexperience in the major market. Guided me right through. That station was on the air by two brothers, Jim and Carol Maxwell. Money they thought was going to be operating expenses for the future. It fell through. They were about to close the doors. God closing this door on me. What am I going to do? At the same time that they are getting ready to close, I get an offer here from Nashville that there is a Channel 17, WMCV, is going to go on the air. And it's back in Nashville. God's bringing me back to home. Interesting that the general manager and the one who hired me was the host of a show that I was directing over on Channel 8, and we moved back in May of '68, and I was frantic. My family was still in Dallas, and I came back, found a place in Bellevue. In June of '68, our daughter was born. So she was pregnant, and she was ready to deliver almost when I was looking for a house here and up here, and they were there. Man, I was frantic. But again, you see how God takes care of things. So I found a place and moved them here in time for her to be born here. Whew. So anyway, I worked at Channel 17 for a while. All of a sudden, it came that our income shifted, and that was tobacco industry. That's when the FDA and FCC or whatever nixed it. They said no more tobacco advertising on television. Well, it so happened that that was 65% of our income was from the tobacco advertising. So here we go again, getting ready to fold. God is closing another door on me. But what do you know? He's opening another door that I wasn't even expecting. It so happens that the general manager of Channel 8 at that time was my old chief engineer. He was the chief engineer when I was at Channel 8 originally. He called me and he said, Hal Green is leaving, our operations manager. Would you be interested? This was at the same time that I'm finding out we're about to close over here. He didn't know that. Only God could have arranged this. Here I am back at home, and this time I had a lot of different experiences. I was marketing manager at that particular point, and we swapped channels with what was then the public broadcasting channel was on Channel 2. So we swapped Channel 8 with Channel 2 and changed call letters and more or less rebranded ourselves. But that was only the second time in history, and it still is only the second time in history that ever had a channel swap occur with the FCC. In 1971, Ira was wanting to start this Amazing Grace program. He had me come out and meet with their forming committee, and that's when we started Amazing Grace. And then it was after that, since that went so successful, that 5 Golden Minutes we started a little bit later. And that was two of the things that I enjoyed during that period that I was at Channel 2 at that particular time. But all of this is God-led. My association with Ira was God-led. I know that. And I am so grateful that how blessed I have been and how God has blessed me beyond anything that could even be thought of. And I went on to stay with Channel 2 until 1982. 1982, I had been through 4 different general managers while I was at Channel 2. Got along with all of them fine and even got promotions. The 5th one came on board, Mendez Napoli. Mendes came on board, and he said, "You're out of here." God closed another door. Hey, I'd never been fired in my life. I didn't know what that was like until now. It's devastating, you know? It says you're no good. I thought, but he fired me. He said, "You know, I really respect you. You're a good man, and I think that you do a good job. But you've got the position that I want someone that I have worked with to be in. And I want him here. And I'm sorry, but you got to go." Okay. So I'm fired. I'm telling you, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what to do. I was on my knees begging God to show me, what should I do, Lord? I didn't have any idea that He'd already prepared it. He already had that door open. I just didn't know it. So He closed this door and He opened a new door. My competition over at Channel 4 and over at Channel 5 was, Channel 4 was Elmer Alley. Channel 5 was Bill J. So during this time that I'm deciding, what am I going to do? Channel 4 had been sold. I knew that. I didn't know why. I didn't know that they were setting up a network on cable. Wow. But Elmer found out that I'd been fired. He called me. He said, he told me what was going on. "Oh, really?" And he said, "Yeah. Would you like to consider coming over here?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Well, you'll have to interview with David Hall." So I went, met David over at a restaurant in the back corner. You know, one of those things. And asked if I would be interested in coming with them as their operations manager. I said, I think so. Yeah, sure. He said, "When can you start?" And I thought, I can start tomorrow. I said, "When would you like me?" And he gave me a date, and I said, "I'll be there." And retired from them in 1998. Since I had gone to TNN, things had changed as far as the Amazing Grace was concerned. I was no longer doing Amazing Grace, of course. And they also had different people working. They had A.O. Stinson was a syndicator, and he was setting up stations all over the country. And George Goldtrap came a little bit later and was running Amazing Grace. And so I was really not associated with them at that particular point. But then, while I'm at TNN, things changed. And Steve Flatt, Ira had died, and Steve Flatt came on board. So Steve was the preacher at this particular time, and George Goldtrap was getting out of the business. He had his own business at was that he needed to transfer to, and all the stations had been lost. We were losing stations everywhere. So Steve contacted me and said, you need to come back and take over Amazing Grace, get it back on track. Could you do that? And I said, well, I've got a job right now. And he said, do it part-time. Well, you can do it part-time. You can still hold your job. I said, okay. And that's what we arranged. So I was working still at TNN and doing Amazing Grace. Then I decided to retire from TNN, and that's when I went full-time with CPI. Now, you and I hooked up during this time, where we bought the equipment from, and you came with the equipment to CPI. And so we were producing it with your equipment there on site. And that became a part of CPI. And then I was, at that time, became full-time with CPI. I had retired. During that period of being with Christian Productions, we did a lot of things. Amazing Grace kept deteriorating as far as stations were concerned. We were losing more and more stations, and we changed the format. We decided to do entirely different. But Steve was doing Amazing Grace. And it turns out that we finally wound up back in the auditorium, and they were just doing a preaching. And that was the program. And we did that. But we also did some other programs as well. We did a ID 21. We did that program. We did Creators Kids. And we also tried to merger with Herald of Truth and World Christian Broadcasting. That didn't work out, but it sure did give us some input and the relationships that later we did a program for World Christian Broadcasting, a Russian program in St. Petersburg, Russia. And we CPI produced those programs for World Christian Broadcasting. Also, all of the Amazing Grace programs that Steve Flatt had done were closed captioned and used in Korea. And they used them in Korea on air, and he became a star over there. And they used them very effectively, and it worked extremely well. That was another thing that we did from CPI. We also produced, with the Open Bible, Kanda de Biblia Abierta. And they're still being used today, by the way. They are being aired all over the country, and on cable, as well as the DVDs are being distributed everywhere, and it's online. You can go on the website and download and watch them. So they're still being used. Again, this is one of God's blessings, that we were blessed to have Rex Morgan, who's the only missionary I know anywhere that knew how to use media for mission work. And he did effectively and still does. That's my time at CPI, and finally retired from CPI. This was my second retirement in 2002. started enjoying life and enjoying playing golf, just doing things that I enjoyed. Enjoyed working in the yard, and I would go down to 50 Forward to work out all the time, and I was just enjoying life, grandchildren, children. God just blessed me like no one else. That just gave me a tremendous life. And in early March, I began to even feel a little bit more loss of strength, but I was still feeling good. I'd be out there weed eating in my yard, and I'd start coming up this incline, and I would be breathing heavy than I had been. And I thought, man, what's going on here? I was going out to the mailbox, and I would get winded just walking to the mailbox. And I thought, whoa. When I would get on the elliptical, I'd start getting winded that I had not been doing before. Went to the doctor. They did a EKG, and he said, you need to see your cardiologist. So I did. I went to see the cardiologist, and he said, you've got a fibrillation. So they did a cardioversion, and it took care of the problem. I woke up, came home. Hey, I was breathing great. It was so good. And I said, thank you, Lord. That was good. So I was back to my normal breathing until 4 hours later. I'm panting. I go to bed. The next day, I'm supposed to work the poles. We're supposed to open the poles. So I do. I get up, I go, and we open the poles. And man, I'm starting to pant now. I'm really getting out of breath. Bad. So about 9 o'clock, I'm panting so bad that I said, hey, I can't stay here. Call and get somebody to come and relieve me, because I'm out of here. I just cannot breathe. So I start out, and going out the door, there's, to get to my car, about 100 feet incline. And I go up that incline halfway, and I'm thinking, I can't breathe. I'm not going to be able to get up this incline. So I stop, and I gasp until I can breathe again decently. And then I finally get to the car. I get home. That's when I call the doctor. And that's when he said, get to the ER now. I did. Went to the ER and got in. They put me on oxygen, did an EKG, started running all of these tests, and I was still, they kept cranking the oxygen up, and I'm still panting, and they keep cranking it up till it gets to the 10, which is all that that's as high as it can go in the ER. And so they said, we've got to move him to the MICU, which is the lung ICU. And they moved me up there because they had a machine that would pump a larger volume, a higher volume of air into me. And they did. And they were pumping, I thought he said 30 units. Whoa! That's a whole lot more than 10. But it got me breathing. I was beginning to breathe again. And he said they finally got me settled down. And they started giving me all of these different medicines and running all kinds of tests and what have you. They finally got it where they, over a couple of days, that they could get it down to a 15. That was over a period of time. But anyway, while I was there, the doctor that was on call happened to be named Dr. Farrell. Now, I got to tell you, he was God appointed. There's no doubt about it. God appointed him to be my doctor. He had already placed him there, so when I came up there, he would be my doctor. So they ran these MRIs and finally were able to determine that I had interstitial lung disease, which means I've got a lung disease, but they have no idea what that disease is. I'm going to have oxygen at home. He said, you're on oxygen 24/7 from now on. Everyone were interested in my case. Everyone were not treating me as if I'm a number. I was just blessed. God bless me with the best doctors there is. Going further, after the interstitial lung disease, and then they kept running all of these tests and did a CAT scan. And this CAT scan is when he came back and said, well, we know what it is. The disease is now. It's pulmonary fibrosis. And it is there, and it is something that we can treat. But we can't cure it because it's already done the damage. Hey, that's no problem. God's in control. We know that. So, okay. All right, what do we treat? Well, there's a new drug out that I think we should use. It's been successful in some studies in keeping the fibrosis from getting any worse. However, it's very expensive, and you can only get it one place. It's a specialty pharmacist. We can furnish this to you, and that will be about $10,000 a month. And I said, that's the reason I'm calling. I can't afford $10,000 a month. There's no way I can do that. I don't have insurance, prescription insurance. And he said, oh, God directed again. Listen to this. He said, we have an organization that furnishes grants for those that will qualify. And he said, you might want to I will contact them and have them send you the forms to fill out. This guy said, you qualify, your grant is going to cover your cost. You get them free. See how God works? You see how God works? I'm telling you, it was just a blessing. So I started on LFEV. Okay, so I'm taking OFEV. Now I get all of these side effects from OFEV. Oh my goodness. All kinds of stuff. I lose my appetite. I don't have any taste. And everybody knows I love coffee. I couldn't even drink coffee. What? Man, it's just messing me up. Anyway, I got all these side effects. So now the doctor's trying to determine, make sure that side effects and not something else going on. So he ran this CAT scan of my digestive system. Got it back, And he said, well, there's nothing wrong with your digestive system. However, there's something else going on that we had no idea. He said, you have an abdominal aorta aneurysm. It's about 3 inches long. And we're going to have to address that. And there is something going on in your bone structure. I can't tell you what it is because it doesn't tell us on this, but it shows an abnormality in your bone structure. Okay? We can attack that though, can't we? Yes, we can. God's in control. All right. So what do we do? He said, well, we'll schedule with Dr. Lee, vascular surgeon, to take care of that aorta aneurysm. And I want to do a bone scan. In the meantime, I'm having this panting, and one of the things that showed up in one of the x-rays, I got fluid. So Dr. Farrell says, we need to pull that fluid off. And he said, we're going to have to put I'll call it a port, Purex is what they call it, in that is a regular permanent tube. And he said, we'll have to put that in. And in the meantime, I'm going to send this last batch to the lab for them to test it and find out what's causing this. I said, okay. You know what's best because God's directing you, and I know He's working through you. That's good. So we're going through this. So that's the reason I was in the hospital, was to put this port in that I have right now, the Purex. So I have a tube that the nurse comes every 3 days and drains that fluid off now. So anyway, we, as I'm sitting there in the hospital, after they put this in, is when he gets the results of that CAT scan that I mentioned earlier. And he's coming in to the room, and he's telling me, we've got the results of that CAT scan, and we found that you have a spot on your lung about the size of a quarter, and it's cancerous. He said, that is cancer. I can't, there's no way that I can really tell you how Norma and I both felt at that particular moment, except that's fine. Because God's in control. And He gave us a piece of mind and a comfort level like I've never experienced before. It was, we've joked about this since then, that it was like He was telling us, well, you got a hangnail, so what? Even though it said that it was cancer, it didn't bother me. And it doesn't even to this day. Because that's God's plan. Whatever He's planned for me, I'm good with. Because I know it's the best. God only does the best. So I'm in great company, aren't I? I'm telling you. God has blessed me. He poured out His love on me to the extreme. Of course I don't deserve that. No way. But God loves me. And I love the Lord. And I'm telling you, I'm at peace with this whole thing. We're going right along. I don't have any idea what the future holds. Only God knows that. Now, we've been told, the oncologist told us when she came in, this was another God-led thing. She came in and said, I told her, I said, you know, at my age, and I've got cancer, I know first thing you're going to do is say, oh, well, we can treat that with chemo. I said, I don't want the effects that chemo goes through, the misery that it gives you. I said, I just don't want chemo. She said, oh, no. She said, it depends on what kind of cancer it is. She said, if it's the right kind, she said, we've got a pill now that is so effective that it can put it in remission. And it is great. And it doesn't give you any side effects. And it is really the answer. She said, so we just need to find out what kind of cancer it is. I said, oh, that sounds very promising. It really does. So I said, Dr. Farrell, can we get the biopsy done? He said, I'll set it up for this afternoon. It's the wrong kind of cancer. She said, you have stage 4 small cell, and it is metastasized. It's nothing except chemo to slow it down. I said, well, and again, that sense of peace was still there. That didn't bother me because God's still in control, right? So we talked to a couple of other oncologists. A nephew that I have that's an oncologist in Atlanta, and she has a niece that's an oncologist in Seattle, Washington. Her niece put it this way. She said, you know, you have a choice. You can live a quality life for as long as it is, or you can live a life that would be longer than your quality life selection, but it would be miserable. It would be a life of misery. So you have those choices. But it would give you longer time. I said, you've answered my question. No, God answered my question. I said, Lord, it's in your timing. I'll take quality. And that's where we are today. I'm in God's hands, and whatever his plan is my plan. And I am grateful. I've been blessed beyond anything that could even be imagined. God has been so good to me. And it's all because I don't deserve it. But he loves me as he does you and everybody. He has a love that we can't even imagine for every human being. We just have to accept that love. And we accept it by accepting his Son, Jesus Christ, as our Savior.